Okay, so we're going to have my boy Chase Cooper on tonight in about 15 minutes. I'm going to burn through some of the questions that were asked already. So first off, from DCL5, Chase, remember this. What have you learned from Monty, and can you share one part where you disagree with his point of view? Good question. Okay. Brent Ferris, where do you feel the coil stretch in the golf swing to feel torque and speed? In the transition. So if you try to restrict your hip turn and feel it here, you're dead. Okay? And if you try and feel it like this, you're also dead. The coil and the stretch is a natural motion of changing direction. Okay? When you shift into the left side, as you're finishing your backswing, that's what creates the coil or stretch. It's not a purposeful movement either in the backswing or the transition. If you do, you're going to get stuck. You're going to hurt your back. You don't want to be doing that on purpose. C22, how do you counteract overdoing the no turn and the no turn cast drill? You're supposed to turn your pelvis, okay? The no-turn cast drill is trying to get rid of arm swing. So that's usually, limiting up here. And I know that sounds backwards, but you need to let your hips move. You're trying to shorten your arm swing, okay? So let your hips rotate and just feel like you're not rotating your shoulders as much. That's a good way to look at that. All right, a couple more here. Yes, all the lights are on, Tim. Tim, my partner, asked me if all the lights are on. I know it's a little dark. It's a little overcast, so there's not as much light coming in from above the front door. That's probably why it's a little darker. Okay. All right. What is the best intent to get the hands staying in on the downswing and not outwards to the ball? Staying closed longer. The hands getting outward toward the ball is often a rush to get to the ball and a rush to get open. So staying closed longer is the best way to keep the hand. And obviously there are other factors. You don't want to get your hands in too much, all right? In the backswing, you want to make sure you turn enough. You want to make sure you get your hands deep enough. But in transition, not rushing, getting your body open is the best way to get that done. This is my favorite question. Which PGA Tour player could you help with one brief lesson? And what would you tell him? Great question. Jason Day. Jason Day is one of my favorite players. I like the way he conducts himself as a player. He's a great player. But that restrict the hip turn, maintain flex at the waist and hips, and fire the pelvis forward, he has a pre-existing back condition, so that swing didn't cause it, but that movement isn't doing him any favors. And I think he would prolong his career just by loosening that up a little bit. That's a great question. And then that was from Chase Marine, LL Golf. And same guy, how would you fix a player with excessive hip rotation in transition? Justin Rose drill, staying closed longer, maintaining flex in the left knee longer, getting a deeper hip turn in the backswing, starting the arms sooner so they link up better. Those are all good ways to get that done. When shallowing, I find I get an open club face at impact. What could I be doing? Great question. So when people try and shallow the club, they will drop the right shoulder. Okay? Look at how that club face is going to open. You want to stay in left tilt, and the shallowing motion is with the wrists, okay? That's how you get the shaft moving on a flatter, shallower, you know, people say shallower. That's a different variable, but I won't mix up semantics. But stay in left tilt, and it's a wrist movement, not a shoulder tilt. The drop it and the slop movement is what gets the club face open. Great question. Okay, that was from Greg Williams, 6769. Mudsy says, when working on getting shallow, does this promote more of a hook ball flight? No. If you're hooking, trying to shallow it, it's very likely you're doing what I just described. Shallowing by tilting the shoulders. That shifts the path out to the right. Then you got to flip the hams closed to not hit it over there, and there's your hook. Is that better, Tim? Apparently I keep going out of focus. Me out of focus is probably better, you know, at least you can hear what I'm saying. Is the right wrist bent, flexed at impact? Okay, so right wrist, that's it. If you're a right-handed golfer, this is bent, this is called extended, this is flexed, okay? So no, you don't want a flexed right wrist at impact. You want to extended right wrist at impact. So that's what that is. Okay, that looks like all the oh, a couple more here, sorry. Kenny B240. Should the takeaway use more left arm than right arm? Maybe. A lot of bad golf instruction has come from people expressing their own feels versus reality. The right-sided, I teach a right-sided swing. I teach a left-sided swing. It's a misnomer. Should it be right-handed takeaway, left-handed takeaway? Yes. Everything has to work in Congress to make a good golf swing. And for you to say that universally this is right, anybody that says universally this feel is right, you know, a good golf swing, generally speaking, X, Y, and Z happen. And as an individual, you're going to feel different things. I could make a right-sided swing and a left-sided swing, and they would look identical to the naked eye. So it's about what you personally feel to get in the right position. So this comes to something that I talk about a lot. You have some people that say that the golf swing should be athletic and it should be getting the right feels down, and you know, it shouldn't be mechanical. Wrong. Then you've got another group of people saying you have to know what the positions are and feels are fleeting and are useless. Wrong. Okay? Just like everything else in golf and in life, the two extremes are always wrong. Oh, almost always. See, always. So, in order to improve your golf swing and in order to make a good golf swing, you need to understand this generally needs to happen. I need to kind of be here, 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 and here. And then you say, okay, these 2 or 3 feels put me into those movements and positions. So it's, you know, it's always 2 parts, okay? You know, it's just like any other activity. There's the foundation, and then, you know, you can't build a house without a foundation. The foundation is knowing what you're supposed to accomplish. Then you can, you know, do all these fancy ideas and feels. And what that feel is couldn't matter less as long as it gets you into the right movement. All right. I didn't have too many rants or tangents, so I knocked those out in 10 minutes. Chase, why don't you send me a request here to be on here in a second. Oh, there he is.
Hello, hello.
What's going on, Chase?
What's happening? I was laughing about the Jason Day comment because that's the same person I'd have said too. He's the easiest fix.
Yeah, I mean, the guy is obviously one of the best. See, I think you agree with me on this, Chase. There's a difference between someone that's a golfer and that, what their swing is. Brooks Koepka is an amazing golfer, but the swing kind of difficult.
Sure. I mean, they're both amazing athletes, first of all.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the thing is with Jason, too, the fact that he's been having back pain, I mean, free up the hip movement a little bit. I mean, we know that limited hip rotation and then side bending at 120 miles an hour is going to create a lot of pain. I mean, it creates a lot of torque at the joints. And, I mean, why not? It's just that's the lowest hanging fruit by far.
And what's ironic to me on this is you will get people, and one of the individuals I'm talking about, that say that that's hogwash, and the back problem is a pre-existing condition and not caused by the swing. And I'm like, well, if you got a pre-existing back condition, all the more reason to take the pressure off of it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So I don't know if you heard, somebody wanted to ask what is something that you think you and I disagree on a little bit.
Interesting. There's a couple of, I'm okay with allowing somebody to try some wrist angle stuff a little bit. I'm okay with allowing a little bit of load in transition. I mean, I don't mind. Like, I've got a lot of players with really strong grips that'll get really extended at the top and won't quite get into flexion. And I might let them get away with that a little bit more than you would. But I mean, for the most part, we've got what?
I agree with you on that 100%. But you're dealing with often a higher quality of player. You get a lot more top juniors and college players than I do. And if it's not part of the problem, I won't fix it. The problem is the vast majority of the people coming to me are in like the 5 to 15 handicap zone, and everything you just described is pretty much going to be a disaster for that group of people.
Right. And I mean, heck, we've done what? 6 golf schools together, 5 or 6, 7, something like that. And I mean, very rarely would we would have diverted past a little bit, but I feel like for the most part, we got the player in the same spot.
I agree.
It's funny because some of my students, or some of my lessons that I've struggled with, are those 10 to 15 handicappers that don't have a lot of time to work on some of the stuff that I'm used to getting these players that just want to grind and get better, and they're really good, and they've got a lot of time to work on the games. And so I'm okay getting lost in the weeds, or a little deeper into the weeds than say some of your clients are. And sometimes I'll lose those guys because they get stuck doing some stuff that's probably a little bit too technical.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm very blessed. I get to work with a lot of really good young juniors and a lot of really good players.
Yeah, see, that's whenever I get a really good junior, like a mini tour player or whatever, that's a lot of fun, because then I get to be a little bit more of a nerd.
Sure. I mean, and that's, my background. I come from the tech world, so I love getting deep in 3D and all that stuff.
Yeah, just for the people that aren't familiar with you, besides that, you and I are good friends, give them a little bit of your background on, with the 3D, and then
Sure.
when you start teaching full time.
So I see a couple of comments on the bottom about Sasquatch. So I'm 6'7", first of all, and so if any of you guys followed me on Golf WRX, my name was Love to Hack, and I had my avatar was a little T-Rex dinosaur, which was it was coined by yours truly. Monty called me T-Rex for the longest time because I've got really short arms. But anyway, I played college golf at Reno, Nevada, turned pro, played for about 8 years, spent way more money than I made, unfortunately. And then I always was fascinated about teaching and the game, and how to swing the golf club, and how certain players move a certain way and other players, don't. And then I was blessed with the opportunity to work for a company called MySwing. It's a full body 3D motion capture system. I got to travel the world, teaching, educating people on how to use it, how to teach with it. We captured thousands of swings. Was fortunate to spend quite a bit of time with Bryce and DeChambeau and quite a few other tour pros, as well as some of the best instructors in the world.
Let me jump in here for a second before you move on.
Yeah.
As you and I had many discussions about, it's where you started to learn that a lot of the so-called tried and true cliches about what you were supposed to do were not only wrong, but they were often the opposite of what you found in good players.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing. That's what I was so fascinated about with 3D, because I wasn't afraid to test my theories. And a lot of the unfortunately, a lot of the instructors that we worked with, they stay away from technology because it might prove that holding the lag and swinging the right field isn't always the answer.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I learned a lot about in 3D was how we load the club, how we load joints, and then how we unload them, right? And so people talking about holding the lag, holding the lag, holding the lag. Well, by P5, by left arm parallel, no tour pro is holding angles anymore. It is starting to be uncocked, and we're starting to see some even a little earlier than that. I think Bryson was one of the latest. He loaded it longer than a lot of them, and it was just past. I mean, like, they're starting to unload it right here, and so
Right.
we just didn't know any of that stuff, right? So anyway, fast forward to today. I'm the director of instruction at the Big Easy Ranch. Hal Sutton pulled me from my swing from Phoenix and taught with him for a couple of years I'm in Columbus, just west of Houston. Ran the academy with him for about a year and a half, and then he went back to play on the Champions Tour, and I've been running the academy for the last about year and a half. So
Yeah, Chase, for those of you listening, Chase and I, this is kind of funny, and he'll begrudgingly agree with this, is when he and I first became friends, I was a major hater on pretty much 95% of the instructors out there, because I'm like, Chase, this garbage they're teaching, it just can't be right. This is not right. And Chase is like a way nicer guy than I am. He's like, well, I don't think it's nearly as bad as you're saying. And when he started getting into the 3D, he started becoming cynical, and he goes, well, maybe you're not as much of an ogre as I thought. A lot of the things you're saying here is correct. And going around the country and talking to different instructors, I could tell at times it got a little bit frustrating for you.
Sure. I'm still way more of a glass half full guy than you are. I can't imagine how cynical you've been these last couple of weeks stuck at home. But no, I mean, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And the one thing that I think, a lot of the listeners have to understand is that, no instructor is going to about 100% with every student. And as long as you guys go to people that really care and are always trying to get better and always trying to learn and will do everything they can to help you, that's all you can ask for. I would love to say I'm going to about 100%. I would love to tell y'all Monty's going to about 100%. But unfortunately, sometimes we're speaking it in Latin and you're hearing it in French, and it's just not going to play out, right? But I found a lot of big name instructors were kind of pretty dogmatic in their approach, and if it wasn't a certain way, they weren't gonna, if they, one of my buddies, Dan Carraher, always said, a lot of these instructors have a hammer, and all they see, if they see nails every day, they're going to be really good at what they do, and if they don't, they're not going to help anybody. And I ran into a lot of that, and I was really surprised, just because if there's almost like they had blinders on. If they didn't see a certain student, they weren't going to help them.
Right. It's totally true. And I try to do my best to look at every person as an individual and try to not, see the same thing in everybody. But, it's really, really hard because, the entire golfing public has had hold the lag and fire the hips, just hammered into them and shift weight since the day they picked up a club. And, Chase and I had dozens and dozens of discussions. None of those things happen. Good players don't hold lag. Good players don't swing the right field. Good players don't shift weight, and good players don't fire their hips significantly earlier. That's the big one. Don't you agree?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of them. Keep the arms in front of the body. That one always cracks me up. Like, it's impossible. And you mentioned 3D. The role of the lead arm was something that I thought I understood, and I really didn't until we got into 3D and really saw what was going on. you know, you've got one camp that says passive arms, passive arms, passive arms, and then you've got another camp that, you know, for the longest time was swing the arms, swing the arms, swing the arms. And I think one of the things you and I always, I mean, the extremes, you've got to be careful about both. And a really good player might need to feel passive arms to get rid of some stuff, or another player might need to take it to the top and just blast the left arm off the chest, your frisbee move that you talk about. I mean, it just depends on the player. And the one thing that you know, we're in a relationship business, and every player that I work with, I understand that they have a story. And, you know, I grew up in Oklahoma with standard length clubs with short arms. And so I'm going to move a little bit differently than say you are, who's got, you know, really narrow shoulders or wide shoulders, you know, narrow neck, short arms, and was trying to hit long drive, you know, hit 400-yard drives for, you know, 25 years. So we're all different, and we're all going to move certain ways, and it's up to, you know, really good instructors to figure out. I see Brian Pates on, somebody like Brian, to figure out how we can make that player in front of us tick, and how we can figure out how to get them a little bit better and help them reach their goals.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, the thing that you know, the thing that really irks me is when somebody well-known, well-established, famous, on all the lists says, like, somebody that everybody would know the name said to me once, I don't have to see wrist graphs. I can look at a picture and know what's happening. And I'm like, you know what? You just won the argument, because I can't go anywhere from there.
I mean,
and to me, there's too much of that. Yeah. And then the flip side is, you know, so that's a lot of the older guys, you know, even older than me, which is old. And then you've got the flip side, which is the younger guys, that if they don't have a graph or a TrackMan display in front of them, they don't know what to do. And I don't want to make sweeping generalizations that all the old guys don't know what they're talking about and all the young guys only do. I'm just saying, like, on either end of the spectrum, that's kind of a problem in our industry. And I think you'll agree that you have to have the data behind what you're telling people with a practical understanding of how it's supposed to work.
Of course, I think we've got to be careful about making assumptions. You know, I see Brian asked a really good question. He said, can you see ground forces, you know, without a plate? Some people say they can. And I'm like, man, 80% of the time, yeah, I can probably have a pretty good idea. But, man, there's some that just completely fooled me. Like, there's no way. Like, he doesn't move like that. And you're looking at the force plate like, what? Hey, hit another one. Let me make sure my force plate. Let me restart my force plate.
Well, look, you know, tell me if you agree with this. You see the same movements and the same force plate data and the same wrist data so often. You watch someone swing, you can make a pretty good guess, and you're going to be right 80 or 90% of the time. But that 10, 20% of the time, you're not just going to be wrong. You're going to be really wrong.
No, that's exactly right. And a lot of times, you know, it was an interesting, you know, working with when I came on board with Hal. You know, Hal's he was a forward-thinking old school player is how I would describe him. He comes from the field-based, and he does it his way. But he was always interested in the technology. And one of the things he always kind of looks, he's a coach now, but he always looks at it from a player's mentality. You know, I think when you win that many times, you're always thinking about how to get a little bit better, and you always fancy the idea of going and competing again and all that stuff, right? But he always thought of technology from the player's standpoint.
Yeah.
And I always told him, I'm like, how, to me, the technology is not for the player. I don't want the player worrying about what their vertical force is or what their torque is or what their, you know, their vertical swing, the VSP is. You know, I want them to go play golf and be as free as they can. And so I always try to convince them. I'm like, look, the data is for me. The data is so I don't make a bad decision and screw you up. You know, and if I'm looking, you know, I'll kind of go through, I mean, video's the easiest one, right? We've got the high-speed video. We look at video. We see what we got iPhones that would have been a $50,000 camera 20 years ago. So we look at the video first, and then I'm like, okay, here's what I think internally. I'm thinking all this stuff. And then I'm like, okay, let me look at the TrackMan data. Does it match what my eyes are telling me? Yep, they're swinging too far into out. Their arms are stuck, blah, 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 whatever it is. Then I look at the force plate and be like, okay, can I do something quickly with the feet to help? Or is there anything I'm missing? Nope, everything's good. It matches the video. Let's go. And so, yeah, 75 to 80% of our students, we could help with just a quick camera. I mean, you do it all the time. But I like having the data just in case to see if there's something, especially when you start working with good, like really good players, as you know, like take you 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when you were battling out on the Nike tour back then. Like, you got to be really careful with somebody. And I know you've had, you've got a checkered past when it comes to what people were telling you. But at the same time, like even coming in today, sure, you need to flex it a little bit more and dump it and not yank the handle. But man, you got to be real careful. You got to be real careful what you say to these players.
The better the player, the more careful you have to be.
Yeah, like real careful.
Really?
And
I mean,
I don't mind screwing up a 20 handicap. I don't want to screw up a +5. I don't.
Well, Tim, you still on?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, anybody asked Chase some questions yet?
I don't know exactly, but I think a lot of these questions are going to be questions that both of you could weigh in on, or we can just take turns sort of thing. There's plenty of general swing questions, so if we want to get into those.
Yes.
I'm going to start from the top and work down. If I skip your question, it may just be because something has already been clearly asked and dealt with recently. So, Chris Schnee is actually up first. So I'm assuming this is a legitimate question. But he's asking about ground reaction forces and how we can use those forces to create more club head speed.
Okay, Chase, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Have at it. So
there's 3 types of forces. You've got torque, so we can rotate. We've got horizontal force, so we're going to slide back and forth. And then we've got vertical. To me, for the last 25 years, everybody was teaching torque and horizontal. No one was really teaching vertical. The key for me with vertical force, it's the easiest one to create more club head speed. I mean, if you've got, Mrs. Haverkamp that's not creating any vertical force, you can get her jumping at it and you can pick up 5 or 10 miles, or 5 or 10% of club head speed pretty quickly. You can get some major gains. Here's the tricky part with vertical force. We've got to load down properly. And what I mean by that is we don't want to jump out of necessity to create room. We want to jump because we're timing it right, and we're jumping just before impact and we're in a decent position. And so one of the things that I know, Money, you talk about, but I like to see a downward motion first move down. And so you'll kind of see I like to see kind of this we call it it's actually unloading, but I term it loading. Like we're loading into the ground a little bit, so then we can extend. What we don't want is we don't want an early jump, and then we don't want to jump because we're in such a bad position where we're having to do it to create room. And so to me, it's vertical force and it's timing vertical force. That's always the easiest one.
See, to me, the point that I always make is the middle letter on the acronym is R. This goes pretty much everything in the golf swing. It's reaction, okay? So the downward movement that Chase is talking about, the way that I describe it is, you can't see center of the pelvis in, when you've got clothes and body, they can't. But I like the belt buckle. And when you watch, a lot of the great swingers and long hitters, their belt buckle goes diagonally down and forward. So the reaction force is this way. So in Newtonian physics, you want to create the action, which is going to be that way. So if you go down that way, then you're going to push this way. All right. And a lot of the problems with golf instruction is that, whether it's lag or shaft lean or getting the hips more open or creating vertical force, ground reaction forces, we are trying to treat the reaction as an action and then we fail.
Yeah.
So shaft lean and ground reaction force and hips getting open, those are reactions to going up.
It almost always starts earlier. I mean, it pretty much every time starts earlier. And that I had a new student come in the other day, and their head was coming up at impact, and I was like, is your instructor working on that with you? Yeah, he says my head stays down. Yeah, well, his path was like 12 right, so he was stuck, and then he was coming up to save it. And I mean, I had to get a really heavy club and say, look, if you get this sledgehammer right here, how are you going to make contact? Like, you just can't. You're going to have to come up. So you're being an athlete. You were doing it because you had to. And so the jump is, if timed right, the jump is the easiest way to create speed from what I've found with force plates. But you got to be in the right position to do it. You can't be doing it out of reactionary, as Monty says, or I say out of necessity.
Yep. Awesome answer, Chase. What's next, Tim?
C. Miller is asking, any tips to add width to the downswing? He tends to get narrow in the downswing, and he says he swings at the ball.
Okay, Chase?
I mean, to me, I'm going to first look at his backswing. So, you know, is he too wide and then he's narrow this way? And so one of the quickest ways I've found to get wider here is to let the right arm fold more this way. So if again, exaggerated, but if you make this backswing, you can't go anymore. So one of the things I would do is go to the top, stop, and then go. Like, feel like you just throw it and see what happens. Get the, you know, he mentioned hit at the ball, get the hip motion here, so then we can just pivot and rotate, versus if we get this way, at some point we got to release it. And if you're holding it on too long, that's where you get that kind of flash feel at impact.
Chase, would you agree? This kind of goes back to what we were just talking about 30 seconds ago. Would you agree that the overwhelming majority of the time, when you're doing something wrong and you want to do it better, that in order to get that result, you have to do the opposite? So like, everybody wants to get their hips open at impact because that's the rage. So in order to get your hips more open, you have to keep them closed longer in transition.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
But, I mean, very rarely do we ever see like, hey, I need to get my hips more open, and so I'm going to keep my hips more open, or get my hips more open to fix the problem. That, unfortunately, if that worked, everybody would be plus handicap golfers.
Right.
It's because we're all smart enough to figure all that stuff out, but we can't do it because it usually exacerbates the problem.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, bad movements are the result of your body saying, well, you're doing the other bad movement. So. Yep. So the guy that just asked the question, you're getting narrow because you're too wide. That is
probably.
Exactly. I was going to say, without seeing it, we don't know, but the vast majority of the time, that's the issue.
Yeah.
And then getting people to understand, this is the one that always freaks everybody out, is the center of mass of the club, or the sweet spot of the club. Once you get settled and set and loaded and you change direction, the center of mass of the club and the sweet spot are going away from the target and away from the golf ball. Yeah. And I get the strangest looks when I say that to people, and I go, just try it. And then they get in all the positions they're trying to get into, and they're like, how did you do that?
Right.
So what's next, Tim?
I got this is a good question. Why don't you both answer this one? It comes from Anil Bajal 11. He's a 15 handicap. 4-iron versus 4-hybrid, pros and cons.
Have at it, Jace.
If he plays in wind, the 4-hybrid could possibly give him some problems. But other than that, I don't see. I mean, at that level, I think it's a 4-hybrid all day long.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in let's make it as easy as possible. And let's be honest, it's significantly easier because the way the club is designed to hit a 4-hybrid solid and get the ball in the air than it is a 4-iron.
Yep.
Here's a question. I'd love to hear Chase's answer first. No offense, Monty, only because I think you have covered this many, many, many times, but I'd love to hear what he has to say. Tech Golf number 1 is asking, what are your tips for getting the right elbow more out in front of the body and not stuck behind you in the downswing?
So, okay, it's actually funny. I haven't talked about this. Last week I had two guys that came in. They're literally like this, like elbows out, like they're muscled up, no external at all. And so I had them do a test. I said, look, come up like this. And I said, I just want to see if you can go this way. Just a simple external rotation test. And they both went, and they're like, did I do it? And I'm like, no, keep your shoulders level and go like this. And neither of them could. Like, this was the best chance they got. So, I knew immediately, like, so that would be the first test I would have him do. I would check to see if we have the motion, because I've got a lot of it, and so I've got my right elbow is way in front on the downswing. So let's make sure that we have the motion first. If we don't, then we've got to look at some other patterns and go into a little bit of punchy or pushy elbow. Not a ton of guys that still do that, but it's still prevalent. There's still a few. As far as how I do it, honestly, a year and a half ago, I remember having a conversation with Money. I hate messing with trail elbows. I hate messing with trail elbows on the downswing, because when you take a guy from an elbow that's trailing to leading, it opens the face so much. And so then we've got to get into these wrist angles, and in my opinion, and I'm getting better at it, but it's a 6-month process.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. And so one of the things we've got to figure out, why the elbow's trailing, first of all. Is it a backswing issue? Is it a transition issue? Is it because the hips have left and the arms are too passive? Is it because our backswing's too long, and again, our hips are leading a little bit, and then we get all this funky stuff? So, I'm a big fan of slow motion reps. I'm a big fan of exaggerating the crap out of stuff. And so, one thing I would do is say, okay, let's make a backswing to where it's a little bit shorter, and we're going to pause for a minute. And then the first thing I want to see is I want to feel like the first move down the right elbow just starts down first. So we do a pause drill, stop, kind of short. And then I want to hit a 7-iron like 50 yards, 60 yards. And the ultimate goal is I want to maintain the right arm bend a little bit. And I want to feel like this starts down first, because if we're chunking it this way, that's a problem. If we're this way, that's a problem. So I'm going to go this way first. And again, I'm a big fan of trial and error, and we try and figure out, what the best way to do it. And I'm going to throw some stuff on the wall, and we'll find something that sticks. That's one thing Monty and I we teach very similarly. Like, I might give somebody 20 different thoughts in a lesson until we find it. And it's like, okay, good. That was it. We're done.
Well, the other 19, well, those are the same exact thing, just said a different way.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I know what the problem is, and I'm going to figure out, try and come up with a prescription to fix it. But that's kind of what I would do. I would make sure we have the motion first, and then there's a bunch of ways to do it, but I'm going to start slow and make sure the backswing's short enough.
It's funny you say that. I see very few golfers with short backswing. Almost everybody's backswing is too long. The arm swing. The drill that I have people do is I have them take their backswing, and then I have them bring the shaft down to 6, shaft parallel, without rotating their hips and shoulders. Have them stop again. They say, okay, just rotate it and hit 30 or 40 yards. And then flippers get shaft lean the very first time they do that drill. And they're like, Monty, how did you do that? The lower body's supposed to lead. And I go, yeah, well, it's not supposed to lead by that much. 2 1/4 of a second. And Chase, I don't know how much you saw of this in 3D, but when I've seen some 3Ds of tour players and then watched it carefully, very, very few of them move their right hip before they move their right elbow.
Oh man, that's a good statement. I have to think about that. We didn't measure independent, like left hip versus right hip independently. I don't know if many systems have, but
so obviously there's always exceptions. But when I watch guys like, and obviously, I've only seen this. Like, I looked carefully on the 3D. I've only seen 2 in this that had this measure that where I could see it, angle. But like when you watch a guy like Justin Rose, you don't see that. Okay.
Yeah.
And Tiger, you don't see that. And even guys that like get their hips really open and like, get that kind of push look, the hip and the elbow are still moving at the same time.
Yeah.
All the stuck people, you will see, even Furyk, who does this.
Take a step back, Monty. You can see it better.
Okay? Even Furyk, who does, his elbow's moving in a different direction, but his right elbow isn't creating separation. Whereas every single golfer I see that is coming in this flips, they're up at the top, and for about 2 frames, their elbow doesn't move in space as this hip is moving.
Yeah.
You're just not going to get it done if you do.
You're dead. Well,
You know,
and it's interesting you say that because I reposted something that Brian Manzella posted one day about Snead, and he posted a face-on video, and he posted it looked like the left leg, the left femur, the left hip was moving while the right hip wasn't moving at all.
oh,
And
absolutely.
it was a great visual, and I never really thought of it like that, but it's essentially kind of what you're saying. So the left hip's gonna, because we saw in 3D the left ankle moves first, then the right ankle, then the left knee, then the right knee, then the left hip, then the right hip. So I mean, we saw some of that, but we didn't ever do a study on like the right hip versus the right elbow to see kind of how they got there.
Well, look, I'm not Sam Snead or any tour player for that matter, but you know what? I'm a 40-pound overweight 52-year-old broken down nobody, but I still hit it really far. All right. And when you watch my swing, especially with driver, I have about 4 frames of left femur movement before my right hip even moves.
Yeah.
And I teach that a lot. And it's for people that have never done it before, it's a rub your belly and pat your head at the same time. But when you watch elite golfers, the separation is different for all of them. But the hips and femurs can move independently. And when you move them together, the right hip and knee and femur work out too much. The video that the AMG guys did on hip movement is amazing. And what it shows is, and they say this flat out, is pros move the right hip a lot in the backswing and the left hip not so much. And then on the downswing, they move the left hip a lot and then the right hip not so much.
I remember seeing that.
Whereas amateurs are completely the opposite. And I've done it on these little shows here. You watch a pro, their hip turn looks like this. Left, right hip movement. This just kind of comes out. You watch amateurs, they're doing this.
Yep.
Okay. And then on the downswing, they're doing that.
Right.
And, so basically I just tell everybody, more right hip movement in the backswing, more left hip movement in the downswing, because most people are the opposite.
Right.
Try to clear those hips.
Yep. Make a weight transfer.
Yeah. Oh God. We could go, Chase and I could do 3 hours on how all the things that everybody tells each other on the one that I'm really, really, it was called the lag for the longest time. Yeah, my camera went blurry. For the longest time, hold the lag, but that's not real as huge as it was 8 or 10 years ago. Now the one that I'm real big on is keeping your head down on pitching when nobody good does that. Everybody that's a good pitcher, this is their first move. The nose and sternum work up in transition. And, everybody's told to keep their head down so they don't blade it. That's the one that's kind of driving me nuts right now.
I completely agree. I don't get into the nonsense like you do. My little 3 kiddos keep me busy as far as checking out the Facebook groups, but I completely agree. I've taught way more people to let that head go and release. And I'll go on a rant about how, we can, especially in California. I mean, not right now, but normal California, you drive in traffic, you're going 80 miles an hour down the freeway, and you've got a coffee in one hand, your phone buzzed, you're texting in the other hand, you're driving with one knee. You know what's on the radio, you know how much gas is in your car, you know how fast you're going, you know the hot girl that's next to you, the old guy that just flipped you off is next, and then you know what exit. But yet we don't know where the golf ball is. Like, right. Seriously, we can do all that at one point, and that golf ball's just sitting there begging for us to hit it, and we don't know where the ball is. Like, come on.
Yeah. Well,
and it's funny. I love videoing people that they'll hit one and they'll say, "Oh, I moved my head," and I'll show them the video on their heads like this at impact or post impact. I'm like, "You're way pat. The ball's gone. You didn't move at all." Oh well, I love that one. That one always,
Yeah,
that one always gets me going.
I had one guy who just before the lockdown happened, he swore, okay, I blade all my shots because I don't keep my head down. I peek, and how do I fix this? And I took a video of him, and through impact, his head was going, no joke, Chase, it was going like this.
Yeah, he peeked. He peeked at the ground behind the ball.
Exactly. And he was right, because when he did this, in order to not chunk it, he did that.
Ugh.
No joke. No joke. I said, first swing, I said, I want your head and chest right here. I want you to initiate your downswing by going like this. He goes, I'm going to miss it. And I go, just do it. Go ahead and miss it. Try to miss it. And he got up there and he clipped it perfectly. It took 2 bounces and checked. And he took one look at me and he goes, you probably think I'm quite the idiot. So
nah.
what does everybody say when you blade it or top it? Keep your head down.
Yeah.
And it's just not what happens. So
no.
That's an elementary example of pretty much every move that, we've gone through many of them already. Shift weight, hold lag, fire the hips. It's just, keep the left arm across the chest all the way through impact, because this is a timing based swing.
Yeah,
it's all bad.
Well, one thing I want to say too to the guys that you're 10 to 15 handicappers that are any of you guys listening, to get from 10 to 15, especially if you're not a great ball striker, whatever you need to change, it's going to feel really weird. Like for that guy, right? Somebody that's staying down and doing this and then going this way, like that's going to feel so drastic to him. But my thing is and I have to convince guys of this all the time. What do you have to lose? Like you're 15 handicap. Like right. Are you afraid you're gonna blow up to a 25 by doing something a little bit different? Like, no.
The 2 things I have to add to this is, well, that works for me. Well, sorry to say, but if you're a 15, it doesn't work for you, And, you talked about it feels weird. That's a big one. I think that ruins more golfers because, of course, it feels weird because it's different. And I'm going to share a quick anecdote. I saw Butch Harmon once say to a guy, he got sick of hearing, I was standing there, he got sick of hearing, this feels weird, because the guy's striping the balls, and he goes, listen, your feel created the shitty swing you showed up with. And the guy laughed, and I could laugh about it, and the guy just striped the ball the rest of the lesson. So,
that's exactly right.
It's hard to change what you do.
So I'm gonna, sorry to interrupt you. I'm gonna go with the next question because I see this one's been asked a couple times already. Keep the hands up in the downswing. I've seen that, and I've seen passive arms. So obviously there are some really good instructors that tend to teach a pattern where it's passive arms. And here's what I'll say about passive arms. If you have a super deep pivot in the backswing and you've got deep arms and you're a little across the line or a lot across the line, and you're strong and athletic, then all those put together can lead, in my opinion, to a feel of passive arms in transition. Because the passive arms will allow you to shallow the club or lay the club down and get into a pretty position or a pretty good position in transition. Because if you go fast with your arms from that position, you're going to come drastically over the top. Like it's just not going to work. So again, if we're deep in this way, then passive arms can help because as we transition, it's going to start to lay down. But it requires a lot of athleticism to be able to pull this off. And in my opinion, it's hard to hit wedges and 7 irons and 8 irons and 9 irons that way. It's a great driver pattern. And if you can get good enough and teach young kids at a young age, and there's been a lot of instructors that have had success with this, but if you can teach that pattern to these kids driving it and then teach a little bit more neutral with irons, to me, like that's the holy grail, but it's hard to do. And so I'm a fan of a mixture of both. I teach fast arms to some people, and I teach a little bit of a pivot-driven motion to some other people. But if you're a 10 handicap that has a day job and is a little bit overweight and is 45 years old, and you think you can get away with, or you want to try passive arms and it doesn't work really quickly, man, I'm out. I'm not doing it, because you're going to hit shanks, you're going to get stuck, you're going to hit flip hooks, you're going to hit all kinds of, it's just a mess. So that's my rant on passive arms. Because again, look, in 3D, so we've got the backswing, we have a stretch. So this left arm in 3D stretches across the chest. It's called lead arm adduction. So let's just say this angle is 60 degrees. So this would be 90. This would be 60 at address. At the tops, let's say it's 30. It's gonna stretch to about 25, and about right here, it's now being blasted off the chest. Every good player we ever measured by T5, the left arm is blasting off the chest. So passive arms as a feel can work if you're built correctly, but man, it gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Okay, I have a couple things to say on this. First, welcome to my world, where not in a malicious sort of, but people are always trying to goad me into saying something bad about George and the way he teaches. George Gankis. I really like George. I think he's a great instructor. I've got nothing bad to say about him. But here's my things on the passive arm things. Okay, you are not taught to have passive arms in any other athletic act. You're not taught to have passive arms when you jog or kick a field goal. So universally, I just don't let, as Chase said it, hard. I am not about it anymore. I used to be this way. I used to say, that's wrong, that's terrible. And I do that very seldomly now. There is terrible stuff out there. But anything that I thought was difficult or not right or whatever, that's for grumpy old man. So I'm still a grumpy old man. But to me, it's all about getting it done the easiest way. And the example I always use is Monty. You know, why does Phil say the hinge and hold, and you and Seekman and, you know, whatever say, you know, use the balance, unload the wrist. And I say, look, is hinge and hold a legitimate way to hit a pitch shot? Oh, it's a fantastic way to hit a shot. The problem is if you're not out there practicing it for 10, 15, 20 hours a week for the last 10 or 15 years, you're not going to be able to control the spin, the trajectory, and the distance on it. Okay. Right. But if you just allow the weight of the club to naturally unload your real trail wrist and deliver a vertical shaft and deliver the bounce, that is a significantly easier way to get it done. And, you know, the lead, you know, what you were talking about, you know, with the across the line and the deep pivot and stuff, it's a great way to swing a golf club. It's just, it's a more difficult way to swing the golf club, in my opinion. I prefer the, like, you know, that's the Matt Wolf and what's the Korean guy's name that's really good that I'm losing my mind that does it too. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
These guys are great players. I'm more of the Justin Rose, Rory McIlroy way of swinging and pivoting, where you get your hands and arms, you get your hands as deep as you can, as deep as you're physically capable of, with a big, deep hip turn, and then stay closed as long as you can. Give your arms time to link up, and then fire as hard as you can.
Yeah.
So, obviously, there are multiple winners who did it both ways. I just happen to think the Rose McIlroy way is and the irony is, you know, we won't get into hip speed, club head speed debate, but McIlroy has the fastest hips on the tour and starts getting them open among the latest. So, you know, it supports the theory that, yeah, great, get them open. But if you get them open too early out of sequence, they're going to have to stall out, and then you're going to give it one of these. Right. Which, you know, this is where the disaster happens for most golfers. Is not only do they do this and feel this, they get feedback and then it makes it worse. So if you get up here and you make a decent backswing and you fire the pelvis really hard, I am on my maximum range of motion. I can't go farther. I'm going to stall out and swing the arms at it.
Right.
And not everyone's going to say, "Oh, dude, you've got such an armsy golf swing."
Sure.
Get those.
Move the